welcome to Liminal Light, a show that explores the languages of myth and star, earth, sky, tongue, and spirit through weekly astrological forecasts. I'm your host, Chris. Enjoy. Our travels led us to an inland sea in search of lagoons. We thought we remembered the way. The map, a slowly spinning spread of poetry and portrait sketches rustling in our laps. For the first half of the ride, we were navigators, and somehow we got nestled into the open carriage, whose golden chariot wheels roll with a warming fire which soothes our anxiety. The distant gunfire over the horizon ahead worries us. It sounds threatening, but is it merely hot play or actual hard violence? Outside the conventions and laws of the metropolis, people tend to have fun with guns. Are these rounds target practice or a bloody standoff that we steadily advance towards? The compass needle spins with our remembrances and dreams, pointing towards towns we once wet our whistles in, or cleaned our wounds, or purified ourselves, or sowed our seeds, or planted memories. We get on the phone, reach out to old friends and acquaintances we knew or know, let them know we might be passing through, ask if they could lend a bed or an ear, or if they could spare some details and help us piece it all together. We swoop into a village and are soon seduced by the styles stalking the streets, the slash of lipstick speaking to us from storefronts, the soapbox models posing perfectly and gesturing for us to stay a while, to gather round and pass the mic and get our photo taken. It's all so fresh and new. We can't help but wonder if we've been here before the change of heart or the change of seasons, whichever happened first. The hills behind the houses retract and shift and shimmer with jungle and livestock, split from tree bark patterns and tumble into place outside the stables. "They've got a machine here," someone says as we stroll down the main drag. "It sucks the poison out of the air and makes fuel from it." "Not fuel," their friend corrects. "Energy itself." We wonder which is true, or which way we'd rather believe. Every time lightning strikes this pole, a politician in a poet shirt strokes the shaft like a pet post. 1,000 ideas of new products sprout from the base of that willow, and after they've been properly pollinated by our patented strain of bee, we all receive the benefits directly from the water. Congregated craftsmen pull forward and fill their pails with the powder, then migrate up the mountain, just enough to be away from the lights and clamor. One dips his finger in a pool and then presses his moistened digit to the stuff, rolls it against his thumb, and holds it up to inspect it. An amber-colored kernel sparkling with static before the pale yellow moon over the gently setting sun, touched in between with potential electric reaction. "This changes everything," a craftsman exclaims, as a youth approaches from the foothills riding a bull bareback, an old gray man left waiting for him by the latticework of a distant gate, leaning against the collapsed cobble of old foundations. He bares his teeth in a wide grin, revealing jewels and insignias that whirl into motion as if they themselves are alive. "Everything's changed," is his message. "We have to evacuate. The town's turned upside down. It makes no sense. We just have to go." A craftsman licks the air, stoops down and presses his ear to the meadow and listens. Moths landing in his hair and glowworms circling his skull. "We'll ride slow. At night, under the cover of stars along the road of milk." We rise from the enclave of shepherds, pulling mullein and lettuce. One shakes his head and laughs as they pull themselves up on their staffs. "If the sun ain't done come off its cog." Mercury, the Sun, Venus, and Mars have all gotten their chances to sextile or square Uranus and Taurus and taste the food being served, admire the shifts taking place in art, take in the talk on advancements in farm tech. We're being quickly caught up. The divides cleaved by Mars are becoming clear in the news, as well as in our personal lives. We pick up the road before us and raise it like a stang, waiting for the devil to arrive as we are all probably prepared to deal. The tension ratchets up, as do our belts in this watery season across the zodiac from Saturn and strategic sovereignty. Life's a beach this year in that there are sharks infesting the waters and rapidly forming riptides and only salty water to drink. Shrieking monkeys snatch our pina coladas and pull back into the canopy. We'll have to forego normal party procedure. Beach blanket bingo this round is for keeps. But try not to forget, it is the sight of lavender sunsets and island breezes that still soothe and heal despite the difficulties. When we remember hard times, we also long for and toast for the beauty of the bruises. We are poised to touch the cranks and get elbow deep into the controls of our lives. With the innards exposed, we can shift the levers and make drastic adjustments. But we must be careful because we will have to live with how ourselves get reset. Walk the beach back and forth for a few months as a prototype before you commit to a strut. We're shipwrecked out here. We've got to get inventive to survive. And while we float out on the frontiers with the currents towing us past tidal towns of the past as well as washing us up on shores of our possible futures, keep the tactical tokens in mind. We want to walk away with what works the best. It may not be life and death for each one of us, but if it were, you'd want to make sure that you'd win. This is the ritual. There is so much change for potential this summer, we've got to play it as if we're in one long operation. The spirit has been evoked. It's present. What was it you were enchanting for? The metal is glowing hot. What was it you were planning to hammer? The veil is rent. To where were your journeys aimed? We don't want to freak out when a process heats up. It's what we came to do. It's here we do our stuff. It's just that we're in the circle. We're sweating in the forge. For such a prolonged period this time, we might succumb to distraction or exhaustion. We've got to keep our cool, stay steady and engaged with what has been summoned. Venus squares Jupiter smack in the middle of the day on Monday, June 25th at 1 p.m. EST, sounding like a clamorous clang, but that of a great brass bell rung up in the shadows of a belfry, hanging like a riotous choir erupting in the depths of the monument, the chuckling of a giant from the cavern of his gut, the copper dome vertigerous and bright on the hilltop, emanating outward and attracting those around the town like a filter of magnet. We're roused to understanding something about the nature of our characters and how we come together when we interlock, when we intimately embrace, when we are intensely engaged. We might come to comprehend the depths of truth superimposed, the moire patterns that two versions of virtue make when layered together are their own vortex, a churning secret for all to see. There is a lot to learn here, personal resonances that ring deep. Who are we anyway? Our values swell so that they are easy to see. Big, charismatic beauties stalking with swagger, wise to their own games, knowing what they are about, a deep knowledge of exactly what they like and exactly where to go to locate the pleasure centers. The bells may even get overturned and rated for sweets, sucking the ecstasy out of the oyster. Brimming like cornucopias, these churning moires bubble and froth over the rim, and many may, in a general attitude of carnal optimism, proceed into corporeal excess. The tight parameters Saturn has set have been getting their limits tested as planets proceed into Cancer. The thresholds get crossed, and instead of pragmatic retention, we get the wrist slaps and punishing whip cracks of the enforcer when we've been bad or squander our rations. Jupiter and Venus square can be productively excessive with the yes and please buttons, or regrettably so, depending on how drastically you step out. But as Jupiter and Saturn are sextile by sign, you will likely learn something, whether it's how much you appreciate the characters in your life, how deeply they impact you, or how over your head you got satisfying your personal whimsies. On Tuesday, June 26th, all the while the red planet has been grinding to a halt like an overloaded freight train out on the prairie under tense skies, open to the sound of squealing brakes, grinding the tracks for miles. With incendiary puffs of coal smoke, the train halts and whistles blow with cutting steam. This serves to highlight the acute area of your chart that is receiving the martial reckoning, and how it interplays with Uranus's activity between the bull's eyes, and how it all cuts into your personal eclipse cycle narrative. The nodes dancing ballroom under shadowed chandeliers as poison punch is served and Mars storms in like a rush of desert air. May I cut in? And cut he will, whether you give him permission or not. So since there will be some inevitable cutting and burning here in the first decan of Aquarius, we might as well give it a good project to work on, making sure we surgically alter the right limb rather than let him at us or our loved ones with cleavers and shears. You may have been charging to and fro trying to choose a path to pound, or notice him burning a hole in your finances, or an itch to direct your financial torch, shooting up your calendar or slashing your to-do list apart, an impending war with your family or roommates, wondering which creative fire to feed, the grid of routines branding your hide, hostile relationships coming back to haunt you, old debts reigniting, your life path becoming a coal walk, professional life becoming combat sports, your social sphere suddenly populated with psychopaths, or simply your own psyche red and enraged. The topics are already present for most of us, and the mid-May ingresses probably triggered much of the content. Also look to February 10th, 2017, August 21st, 2017, January 31st, 2018, and February 15th, 2018, as these are the beats in the Leo-Aquarius eclipse rhythm, the moments when ping-pong went shadow ball, and for many tell an ongoing story that is colliding with both Mars's retrograde and Uranus's Taurus trajectory. What in Aquarius you have been shedding, and what in Leo you have been becoming. There is new sudden information and influx of activity that bears on the matter in Taurus, and tends turnaround to face the action and purify your process as Mars and Ketu zero in on July's eclipse degree. Saturn remains in Capricorn, so keep sight of the plans you've drafted over the winter. Just get ready to jump from the helicopter into unknown jungle. The goal of the war remains the same, even though this particular few battles are fought in chaotic and unknown circumstances. We'll have to rely on our personal strengths rather than 100% procedure. Be willing to run things as experiments for the next few months rather than run off to engage on old clashes halfway across the world and lose both that conflict and the one we are currently in. I must apologize for all the war analogies, but this is Mars here in tactical tension. Here's a summary that scans to find the bottom line. Saturn's testing structure and foundations. Uranus is reinventing pace, pleasure, and material. Mars is reconsidering tactics, and Ketu is fixing to purge and purify. The focal point is Aquarius, the realm of the outsider, the abstract, the fringe, which will likely see many of us attempt to sever our lifelines and ties to others so that we can find the freedom to reinvent ourselves or change course. The problem is it might go off like a bomb which blows up your whole house simply so you can rearrange the furniture. Take multiple looks and try new things. Make changes in experimental fashion. Wait until after retrograde shadow to make final decisions. Explore, expose, and pay attention to wounds in order to heal them and not ignore them. Rearrange stagnancies. Carefully make space for changing drastically later. Expect difficulties. Incorporate unconventional procedures that fit your personal style. Experiment with odd footing. Safely incorporate ecstatic states to satisfy Uranian impulse. Lean into eccentricities like in improvised music. We might not be privy to all this clarity at once on Mars's day, June 26, but keep this all in mind and begin to lay it out in a manageable routine, such as safe, regular exercise, basic meditation, support of your immune system, getting sufficient rest, propitiation of Ketu, filtering out bad habits and influences, safe ecstatic ritual and trance, and experiments and preparing for positive future change. Mars stations direct on Tuesday. Feel the critical response to this along such safe lines and moves into the odd energy flux of stop and go, on-off Mars, with your head cool. When Mars goes retrograde, it's as if the car either doesn't start or goes 100 miles per hour as soon as you turn the key. Make sure you know the terrain and have the vehicle pointed in the right direction that you intend to go. or else you'll get further away rather than closer to your goals. By Wednesday, June 27th, Saturn will have been in Capricorn for about 6 months and a week. This is the Sun's first chance to oppose him at 9 a.m., and we may see how our collection of new disciplines and regulations fit our needs very clearly. Many of us have tightened our ships considerably, but all this reeling it in has also strangulated our fountains and put our diets on rations. The water pours over the marble breast at barely a trickle, or perhaps even an occasional drip. The cherub blows more tomb air than sparkling springs. Does this all fit in with where we want to be or where we want to be going? Absolutely not. We did it for a reason, to get control, to become stronger, sturdier, more enduring, but at the same time we find that we are emulating death rather than life. It is here that we may need to begin to strike a balance between what keeps us from wasting water and what we have to do to properly irrigate in our greenhouse if our tomatoes are going to grow plump and ripe. Both must look to Jupiter here for help in understanding the deep nature of mutual nurture, the rules of exchange. But he is so many degrees away that we must listen for his wisdom, and coming from Scorpio, this will likely be inflected by Mars's unnerving pause. It's hard to not see how this wouldn't be a time when we would say, hold on, wait a minute, what are we doing? We can't do that anymore. We're doing it all wrong. Stop. I've got to stop this. It's not giving me what I need. We intend to connect with others, and these rules and boundaries are preventing it. While Mars is saying quite loudly, we've got to get out of here, we have to escape, what Uranus has shown us becomes much harder to ignore. And this is a lunation, a full moon in the moon's sign of detriment, with the ruler of the sign in-house and Luna separating from conjunction as she reaches fullness. This is the blossoming awareness of how starved we've become. It's clear as day, we get it. We see it as well as feel it in our bones. This doesn't mean doom, it can mean realization. Only take it with a grain of salt, because Mars is preparing us to attempt to do what we normally would not do. Yes, these realizations are true and trusted felt, but what we might choose to do about it might be regrettable. Sit back, have your glass of wine, or sip your beer, or brew up some tea, and be with this thing. This is a rare opportunity to feel it deeply so that your body and your heart understands it. Go out and look at the water as the moon penetrates it with impression. What do you see? How does it make you feel? Ask it, talk to it. Look to the forest edge, illuminated silver, the animals and wild spirits within also realizing they must begin to get what they really need to fulfill themselves, to fill their cups. Listen to them, hear their whispers. This is a moment of profound reflection. Don't let your feelings manipulate you. Instead, use them to your advantage. Use your emotional capabilities for what they're for. Feel yourself, feel the world, feel out the limits, the laws of nature, and look deep into your own needs and feel how the two might fit together in balance. Use your hands if you have to. Touch your body, then touch the earth. Touch your warm flesh, then touch cold stone. Touch the contours of your bones, then slip your hands into the water. How will you come together in perfection? What would that be like? Tomorrow you may plan. Tomorrow you may choose a course. Tonight, just feel it. Friday, June 29th, 24 hours after this full moon feeling, Mercury ingresses Leo, where his trickster dualities are put on display and intelligent performance dominates his objectives. He isn't just smart, and he doesn't just want to be smart. He wants you to know how smart he is, how quickly he thinks, and how clever he can be, even if he has to trick you into noticing. This pushes Leo's focus on truth into a satirical situation. As Mars is making you remember what you used to do, and Uranus is shoving opportunities to radically reconnect with those activities, the Sun has seen what it has been missing, and Saturn knows what it can't any longer do. Mercury steps in to analyze our personalities and begin to think ourselves into a new identity that might be able to logically fit the changes we wish to enact. If this is what we want to be doing, we must think like the kind of person who does that, and talk like the kind of person as well. Everyone must see us as that by the way we communicate. This is great advice, actually, sometimes, the power of positive thinking and performing positive roles, but notice that this is only when it's carried out in a positive, healthy manner. This transit doesn't promise that. That's up to us to fact check. There might certainly be some fake it till you make it in this recipe, which is fine. It works, but it can certainly spin off some fraudulence of character that can get people into trouble. The sun is in Cancer. It might need to play these characters and display its thinking, to show its notes. That's fine. But remember here to not only swerve too far off the path, as the sun reminds us of what is on the golden road of the ecliptic and what is not, as well as don't forget to take these experiments one trick at a time. You don't want to get out on stage and realize you can't saw someone safely in half. Only say that you can. On Saturday, June 30th, at 9 a.m., Mercury squares Uranus. This is probably the least catastrophic planet to square Uranus, but still makes fried circuit boards more than possible. Get ready for your caffeine overdose. Mercury in such an aspect can extremely overstimulate, which can be great. Drugs can be fun. We love to be fascinated with surprising phenomena after phenomena, spectacular realizations and lightning associations hurrying our brains, firing our synapses. Of course, this quick thinking might be of the sort resulting from navigations failing miserably. This could be the scream erupting from the box as the saw cuts down on our volunteer. How do we think ourselves out of that? Not all realizations are exciting in a fun way. Hopefully the bolts come down and hit to inspire, as we certainly need inspiration to move us through the turbulent configurations this summer presents. We may become incredibly excited. Innovations or destabilizations in the realm of pleasure, pace, sensuality, materials, art create great tension and sound alarms in how we communicate the personal logic of our identity, how we express our virtues and explain what kind of person we truly are. This could be a crisis for some and an exciting jolt of jazz for others, a golden saxophone ripping through the mud. But as all else has fallen into place this week, this likely knots into the eclipse narrative, the Uranus and Taurus story, and the conflicts Mars faces. Try to work out how it could all fit into the big picture while you have the overactive mental capacity to do so. That night at 7 p.m., the moon comes and touches down on Mars, newly retrograde. This is a truly prophetic moment, foreshadowing, and we should be on our scrying surfaces if we want to see what we might be likely to let go of when K2 comes to purify our actions. The moon is waning in conjunction near the degree they will conjoin next month when she becomes eclipsed. She is already in a mode to let go and melding with Mars's intentions, so in a sense this might be a mini version of July 27th's dramatic eclipse. Take heed. This is still a bright moon feeling out an intemperate heat, but pay close attention so that you get the critical insights to avoid a late July conflagration. Welcome once again, Bonnie.
Hi, Chrissy. How are you today?
Good, doing well.
It's a lovely afternoon.
Despite repeatedly reporting on how turbulent the aspects for the summer are going to be, I'm doing good and feeling optimistic.
Right. I mean, I think that within all of these aspects, wonderful things can be realized on the individual level, though we will have to witness some really horrible events in the world. Right.
Yeah, we're going to have to definitely and that's part of what's going to drive us to feel even more frustrated and to be to make poor decisions because we're heated up and impassioned by things just being intolerable, but as it translates to our personal world, and sometimes those overlap. For some people they are experiencing that directly, like the world's news is their personal situation, and for a lot of us we might be spared from that, but who knows what ultimately will happen. But I was explaining, I gave a talk the other day and broke it all down and then, kind of doing that in pieces on the forecast. But I was kind of explaining how it is kind of like you're in that moment of ritual or in that shamanic experience or in that, you're in the forge, like hammering, like the thing that you heat up till it's glowing, and you're in the laboratory with the dangerous chemicals, say like go back to the first example, like you're in the ritual, you're in this circle, you've called the spirit, like it's on. That's the moment, like all of your ritual behavior is led up to that point, and it's time to do the critical exchange, to have the conversation, to figure out like how you're going to get what you want. And you're dealing with hot materials, you're dealing with like hot spirits, or like whether it's physical or not, because some of these are going to land to just internal conflicts, right? If you have Aquarius in the 12th house or something, say for instance, or something like that it's a prolonged period of this rather than just a brief moment, or like a half an hour of hammering something hot, or like 15 minutes of being in an intense ritual, or less, 2 minutes. That this is like the whole summer, right? That you're just this is like one long operation where you're just going to be forced to like get in there and manipulate and make changes in your life. I think the example I gave that is like the kind of the overarching thing people should avoid is, there are changes that must be made. You're like, this absolutely cannot stand anymore. Things need to change. We need to rearrange this furniture. So you like put dynamite all over your house and like, and blow it up, and and then like that doesn't make sense, but that's what you're gonna people might be feeling like doing stuff like that, like absolutely like slashing out the part of their life that's bothering them. But there's going to be a lot of damage around that you really need to figure out how to get in there and carefully move things around. And I think prototypes is a big part of it, is trying stuff out before you make critical change. That the critical change should come kind of almost in like November, December, which is you
get that Jupiter.
Yeah, when Jupiter is well into Sagittarius and the Venus retrograde is over. That's because there's a long chain of retrogrades. So everything's kind of, we're going to be, wanting to do things we don't normally do. And then after that, and then there's going to be like a big vigorous purge midsummer. And then we're going to like things we don't normally like and not like things that we do normally like. So there's this long period of inversion, that, so it's good to like a really good time to try new things and try stuff out. Yeah.
You can like get a few new key pieces for your wardrobe, but don't give away all your old clothes.
Right.
Your old style, maybe.
Yeah. You definitely don't want to put off the big part of the decisions until after this all kind of plays out. And so that should sound fun rather than scary, right? It's just
make it fun, because you have no choice.
Things are going to get intense, and people might feel overexcited. It might not just feel bad. It might feel that you're over amped to do something.
Yeah, you're talking about that on Saturday with Mercury.
Yeah, because that's going to be one of those key moments, like when
Mercury square Uranus.
Yeah, the next Mercury-Uranus square. So that's a good time to observe like what you're starting to be overexcited about. It might be logically clear. And so we see a lot of this stuff playing out in the news already, because we're already in the shadow of Mars's retrograde.
Separation's been a huge one.
Yeah, so that's like Aquarius, like the pileup of like, it's Mars, it's Aquarius, and it's the south node, it's K2. It's just a lot of this like this separation and cutting out from the center, and the kind of exile or refugee or all the stuff. The news is just filled with like all of the like migrant and immigration policies like coming to a head, and of course it's really obvious in the family separations that are going on, which astrologically is so Mars retrograde Aquarius and the Sun opposite Saturn too, like the knowledge and identification with family and nurturing and need, in opposed to like hard law and hierarchy in society. And then also that Mercury's in Cancer right now as well, like people are able to emote more and like express their emotions where this is an issue where certainly emotions come into it.
Absolutely.
We're not often allowed to bring subjectivity into the discussion and say, well, this just is insane. Like, can't you feel this? But and that's a really interesting, I think, that's creeping in, because I think that's part of a bigger story. And you're like, well, how is subjectivity going to kind of win over kind of destructive objectivity? And then it's things like this that says like, oh yeah, like what your emotions and your feelings and how you feel about something actually does totally matter, And then so you see it also with the U.S. withdrawing from the UN, kind of being like, screw this, I'm out of here. And then you see it on all sides, like with like, I just scanned articles today to see what was coming up. And so we have like an article that was like, oh yeah, Facebook is ruining the communities in like, the outer San Francisco area, the tech industry affecting housing crisis and economic inequality, which we all know about. And that's similar effects with gentrification in general. There's like a definite nationwide and even, global like housing crisis, but that people are forced to move out of their community and to move out to who knows where, move out further into the fringes. And so that's like you see like it happening with society and economy, but then you think of like the volcanic eruptions in Hawaii, and it's doing the same thing, even though it's a natural disaster, right? That it's people are like, the community's ruined, we have to get out of here,
Absolutely. On a different level, we have how Canada is poising to legalize marijuana, and U.S. Officials have said that they will increase control at the borders, and it's already happening. I read an article in Mother Jones about that, about a woman, a 56-year-old woman, being stopped at the border who had a Nexus card, and she was just harassed, basically, and detained for a while, and later admitted to taking mushrooms, and she had a possession charge from a while ago, on like from when she was 18, and she was 56 now. So just this that turning away, I think is very relevant right now, and that seems to be a story that has much to do with the current weather. Yeah,
and I think we're getting that mix right now of the Aquarius stuff with Mars, and then also the Cancer Capricorn oppositions. That kind of like that in or out, or like being with your family, because it's the same thing, right? You said her daughter goes to school in the U.S. She's like, oh, I can't be in there with my daughter. It's like, no, you have to be out. We're getting both the Capricorn and the Aquarius stories kind of simultaneously, which just kind of which I think is going to continue, because that's going to be the retrograde. Mars goes retrograde in Aquarius, but then moves back into Capricorn, turns around, then moves back into Aquarius. So we're going to get a lot of this, like the Aquarius part of it and the Capricorn part of it. And that's interesting, because the eclipse axis after this set of eclipses moves into the Capricorn Cancer eclipse axis. So we're kind of getting this, like, those tensions are going to continue. Just that Saturn's in Capricorn. I've noted this a couple of times, but since Saturn's in Capricorn, every month now, the moon has to oppose Saturn when it's in rulership,
Yes.
So we just, it's like a place where we're just going to super feel those oppositions,
Absolutely. So in fashion, just like a couple fashion things, nothing wonderful and exciting this week that I found. But this brand Azos which I'm probably saying wrong, but
ASOS.
Yes, they're banning the sale of all mohair, silk, cashmere, and feathers. So we completely not using anything animal-based in their clothing lines, which is lovely.
Yes. So you see, like, some of the definitely some of the Uranus and Taurus, of course, like changes, big shifts in a material culture, in fashion, and in textiles and materials in general, and then more of that Saturn in Capricorn saying like, no more of this, you know, because if Saturn wasn't in Capricorn trine by sign to Taurus, the expression of that might be much different, right? That like Uranus and Taurus might say like, oh, like, because we're ready for it to be about 3D printing, you know, and about like super crazy like garments that are like holographic and textured.
You get that with Iris Van Herpen.
Right. Yeah. But on this like scale, like what's coming up in the news every day, since that Saturn is in Capricorn, it's the like, until Saturn moves into Aquarius, that list of what Uranus is going to do in Taurus still is going to have a lot to do with like, no more of this, no more of this, no more of this.
It's you're really like taking down the palette that you get to work with, which then which makes sense since
you know this is all about like that we've far exceeded the limits of nature, you know.
Absolutely.
Like, we need to reel it in here.
Absolutely. I found also that this AgriLoop turns food waste into sustainable clothing fibers. So that's, you're using food waste such as banana peels, pineapple leaves, and hemp stalks into natural fiber that could be woven into clothing. So that's amazing.
Yeah, that's definitely an innovation, which we'll have to see. We'll see if there's like major collection efforts.
Yeah.
You know, be like, oh, this all turns into our food now.
Yeah.
You know.
Biodegradable pants.
Yeah. Edible pants.
Yeah. And then I found a very exciting article in Habitat that reforestation in China heralds the return of rare animals that include the North Chinese leopard. The largest population of these leopards have been recorded, and the beautiful golden pheasant. I'm not sure what other animals, but yeah, it says the scientists working in the region have documented the presence of 263 different species, including 8 critically endangered species and 29 threatened species. This diverse ecological community represents major progress for a region that has suffered from deforestation.
Yeah, so even though it's more of a success story, it still highlights the same dynamics. Even though most of what we're seeing is about being pushed outside, we still have one eclipse occurring in Leo and one eclipse occurring in Aquarius. So the Aquarius stuff is going to be stronger because that's where the dramatic total lunar eclipse is going to occur. But we still, since February 2017, have been having eclipses in the Aquarius Leo axis, and so the big one last summer was in Leo. So we're still going to get like both sides of it, like the pulling inside and the pushing outside, you know. And also at this Mars retrograde, you'll see like the things returning. I've noticed it in my personal life. A lot of people coming back from the past, a lot of like things that I was doing before, suddenly having the option to do them again, but kind of in like a crazy destabilized way. And so that is probably going to come up for people. And for me, it's been more about more activities and not conflicts, but it could certainly be like old conflicts. And we'll see how that goes as the summer rolls on. Hopefully I don't get into any old conflicts, but that's very possible to be like, oh, this old fight is back, you know? And it's I think
Austin was talking about like for women and gays, like old boyfriends coming back.
Yeah, right.
So be careful.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, and it just depends on like who's, it's just that Mars Venus dynamic. So the lines there could be blurred. You might not notice it's all guys coming back. It could be like a mix, it just could be like, just old flames, I noticed with me personally, it's like the things that are coming back are like old passions, they're not necessarily conflicts. It just depends on what you do with Mars in general. If Mars is the planet that leads your creative life or leads your social life, it could be like old friends or like old creative projects. It's not always going to be fights, but
So there's an element of nostalgia.
yeah, you could especially right now because there's so much water going on. Like there's that grand water trine, and then stuff in it's Cancer season, so it definitely could, like, that's part of the enchantment perhaps into like falling into things from the past, is being like, oh wow, this is back, like what if I did that again,
or even just
and getting your emotions played with, and it gets more like intellectually tense later in the summer, to where like you're like, okay, I definitely want to make this change. How do I swing it? Like, how do I think it into action?
I really like the advice you gave in the forecast for health, mind health and body health, and just regular for this Mars retrograde into the eclipse. It falls on my, is it 5th house?
Or 6th house.
6th house, right. Thank you, my astrologer. And so we were talking about like health and routine, and so this fits in nicely for me, but also I'm sure anybody can benefit from safe, regular exercise, meditation, definitely immune system, especially as in this time of year, in this area, there's a higher increase of getting bit by a tick with Lyme disease or some other tick-borne illness. And so in the TikTok we went to, that was it said that vitality was the key to it. So it seems like a good idea to engage in these activities just to avoid that, and just taking care of yourself.
I've been thinking about that recently, is like, and just so you can engage in witchcraft, right?
Right.
If you're gonna get out there under the full moon and get nude and like like get ecstatic, like you got to make sure that your immune system can handle a possible tick bite.
Yeah, definitely. It's good point.
Right. Don't be afraid, right?
Yeah.
Or be smart, but don't live in fear.
And then there's K2. Do you want to talk a little bit about K2? I feel like you did a little bit last week, but maybe.
Yeah, I'm going to get more increasingly into K2 as we get closer to the eclipse. But the North Node and the South Node in the Indian traditions and the Vedic traditions are Rahu and K2. And Rahu is the North Node and K2 is the South Node. And it's upon K2 that the lunar eclipse is going to occur in Aquarius, and it's tightly conjunct retrograde Mars. And so K2 wants to purify. It's Rahu wants to bite deeper into manifestation and gain like further control and entanglement into your life and what you're trying to do. And or did I say that right? Did I say Rahu does that? That's what Rahu does. And K2 is the opposite. K2 being just the dragon's tail, where Rahu is just the head. Rahu is always hungry, wants to bite more and eat more. That's where the tongue and the nose are, right? It can taste and it can smell. It wants that food, but it can't contain it. And then K2 is just the tail. It's the excretory system, and it's filled with the food that potentially that Rahu has eaten at some point before they were separated. And they were mythologically separated in a creation myth, where they swallowed the Amrita and then were cut in half, and the head went to one end of the ocean of manifestation and the tail went to the other. But so it's the excretory system, and it's already full. It doesn't want more food. It's disgusted with manifestation. It doesn't want any part of it. It wants to retract and retreat, and also filter. And so there's propitiation you can do through mantras to K2, which isn't normally the mode I would go into with, it's not like every problem that comes up, it's like, oh, well, just borrow stuff from Indian tradition, borrow stuff from like another tradition that's not native to you, right? But and I've been trying to work with this and figure out a way and research into it to find like more evidence of what to do with the nodes and in the Western magical tradition. And it's possible that like, especially witchcraft can be really helpful. That's much more of it, takes much more of an embrace. Because it's like facing poison directly. And that's like a shamanic level approach, right? Like you're actually like experiencing initiatory overwhelming stuff, but not some people, like it's their MO to just avoid overwhelming poisonous stuff, right? And so the Indian tradition has spent the most time with Rahu and Ketu and since astrology is such a big fabric of their society and paradigm still, and just the like posturing of their religious practices and ritual practices, there's a lot of focus on remediation in general. So there's you can just Google it on YouTube and you'll see, if you just Google like Ketu Bij mantra, and there'll be mantras that come up that you can repeat to Ketu. Would have already started by the time this broadcast days and days ago, so you'd have to catch up. But a lot of times you'll see it says to repeat the Ketu's Bij mantra 18,000 times in 40 days, which is just over
4 times
four repetitions of a mala or japa beads. 108 4 times a day. And but you can jump in there at any time, and I'm sure it'll help out. And it's just a bigger list I have for this season of regular exercise, safe regular exercise, supporting your immune system, getting rest, propitiating Ketu, filtering out bad habits and influences, and engaging in safe, regular, ecstatic ritual or ecstatic experience, so that you're able to like self-manifest those kind of like ecstatic kind of tower card kind of experiences so that like it's less likely that Uranus is going to hand them to you in ways that you don't want them because you're deficient in them. He's like, oh, who needs their top blown off? And it's like, well, this person just blew their top off. That person has not done it, so they're going to have to do it. And then experimenting and preparing for positive future change, so that remember to put like that big change in the future. I kept explaining to people over the past week that like what you enact over the summer will end up probably being an experiment without you realizing. If you're like, screw this, I'm out of here, I need to make these changes in my life now, I want to move to whatever Taos. Yeah, Taos. Yeah. And that's all I want to do. I know that. And you do it now. You like quit your job, sell your house, sell your car, break up with your girlfriend, put your dog in a shelter, like, and then go to Taos. After like 2 or 3 months, you might be like, I actually hate it here, and I really want to go back to
what was I thinking?
Yeah, what was I thinking? I've learned some things. Like I've learned this. Maybe you don't want to go back where you came from, but maybe you want to move somewhere else or do something like less drastic, and you realize that you didn't need to cut all those ties just to do that experiment, that you could have easily done it as like a weekend trip and figured out if you liked the place, and that's what I mean about like blowing up your whole house just to rearrange the furniture. So that like it's revealed that this big life change thing was an experiment. It was just a really costly experiment. And so to just be in experimentation mode until at least like November, December, so that you so you don't like fall into that trap of being like, whoa, that experiment cost me everything.
Yeah, and we've been talking about making room for experimentation within your life. So that you don't just go and sell your house and completely change your life. You have the room to do the things that you need to do to get that out. It's very healthy and lovely.
Yeah, and so you'll see a lot of stuff breaking in the news, like things coming to a head and just being like, this is broken. so and such party just walked away from it and it's like totally frayed. Or
I read about a Republican revoking his Republican party card or whatever they have. He's done with it.
Yeah, we'll probably see a lot more of that.
A lot of that.
Because even in the family separation debate, right? Like Trump is at this point, I don't usually go into talking about Trump mode at all, especially on the radio, but it's a good example astrologically. He is already well, yeah, I don't agree with it either, but the Republicans are going to have to do something.
Bad.
No, but he's the Republicans are going to have to do something about it, like the party, right? And so that's kind of that, you're probably going to see a lot more people being well, you know what? I can't even be a part of this anymore. I have to walk away from this. This is, but in all that, even though you'll see stuff breaking, you will see probably some stories that are gearing themselves around we need to create space so these changes can be made. The reason, it'll be more and more of a theme that the reason why changes can't be made is because stuff is so tight that there's no room for change.
Right.
Yeah.
You have your life on such a schedule that there's no room for experimentation. So of course you're going to blow. If your house is so tight and you're trying to put that bathroom addition on or rearrange your furniture, well, it kind of does make sense to blow up the house,
Yeah. But or at least sawzall out a wall or something, But so that's kind of, so to make sure to kind of, and all those things I mentioned as kind of exercise, etc., meditation, it just puts you in a mode to have that space created so that you are able to make the changes, because you're calming yourself down. You're less susceptible to impulse. There's moments of silence. You can process stuff.
It's beautiful. This is not necessarily within the topic of this week's.
Yeah, this is a sudden Uranian shift Bonnie's about to make.
But I just think this is so cool. So at the World Cup, the headline is, Japan fans impressed by cleaning up stadium. So at this match, their side, Japan won the opening game, beating Colombia 2-1, securing the team's first victory against the South American side.
So we're talking about the World Cup now.
Yes, I did. But after the team swept Colombia off pitch, Japanese fans also did their share of sweeping, meticulously cleaning up their rows and seats in the stadium. They all brought trash bags and marched through the rows picking up rubbish to leave the place just as neat as they found it. And this is not the first time. The supporters of the Samurai Blue have never failed to stick to their good manners. It's not just a part of the football culture, but a part of Japanese culture, Japan-based football journalist Scott McIntyre told the BBC. He is in Russia following the team and was not at all surprised by the somewhat different nature of the Samurai Blue fans. You often hear people say football is a reflection of culture. An important aspect of Japanese society is making sure that everything is absolutely clean, and that's the case in all sporting events and certainly also in football. And that, I just think, is the most amazing. I don't even care, I don't care about sports, but
we can learn something, because we were just talking about creating space, even keeping things clean, because we're shooting for that feng shui mentally and physically. And so even in all of our activities, we can try to be a little bit more fastidious,
leaving things better than how you found them.
Yeah,
I love that.
And then the opposite side of that, in a way, is we're definitely seeing with this current week things coming to a head with the opposition of the Sun in Cancer and Saturn in Capricorn, all of these all of the disciplines we put on ourselves since winter. So many people have quit smoking, quit drinking, improved their diets, lost weight, are on a schedule or on a budget, that we've actually ratcheted ourselves down into this state where we might not even
belt tightening.
Yeah, we might not even like our life anymore. We're not alive anymore, And so it's not we have to backtrack, but just kind of be oh, wait a minute. We can't just turn to stone so that
That's where that
we don't
ecstatic
fail.
play comes in.
Yeah, we have to now start incorporating the ecstatic experiences that we absolutely need to kind of flood our like souls, you know?
Yeah. Inflame our creativity. Well, we also have another story of the sea nomads. They are the first known humans genetically adapted to diving. And these are the Bajau people. I have to check that. Yeah. And they are sea nomads. Let's see here. Most people can hold their breath underwater for a few seconds, some for a few minutes. But a group of people called the Bajau take free diving to the extreme, staying underwater for as long as 13 minutes at depths of around 200 feet. These nomadic people live in waters winding through the Philippines, Malaysia, and Indonesia, where they dive to hunt for fish or search for natural elements that can be used in crafts. And they found that it's a DNA mutation for larger spleens that give them this genetic advantage for life in the deep.
Which is so amazing. I'd love to study that more from like a humoric perspective, you know, and like, okay, well, the bigger spleens, now they can like be underwater for longer, you know. That's just fascinating from like, oh yeah, let's look at some of their charts and see like how they're constituted, you know. But it's also amazing. It reminds me, like, some years ago, Genesis Peorage started talking a lot about like the need to evolve, that like if we're gonna like survive in space, we need to grow fur so that we can like withstand the cold, and we need to like, you know, maybe like become more like bears and be able to hibernate so that we can be on long space journeys, and just examples, you know. And was kind of like pro genetically engineering humans, but also just evolution in general from wherever it was going to come from. So it's really interesting with Uranus and Taurus, where it's like the material and like you know, you have the whole list of like Taurus is like materials, like food, you know, arts, crafts, like aesthetic, etc. But that the principle of fertility itself is within Taurus. You know, like how things grow and what they're going to grow into, what growth is possible.
Definitely.
And so hopefully we see positive changes in how everything manifests from that very deep greening principle.
Definitely.
Okay, well, I think we are definitely out of time, but thanks for listening, and Bonnie, thanks for joining me.
Always a pleasure.
And we will see you next week.
Yeah, happy Mars retrograde.